will challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. Apologies for our very late start because we had some technical issues. We're not even sure whether we've resolved the technical issues. I think we still have them. We'll just see how somebody said George late, maybe he's collecting slides. It's not. No, it's not because of that. It's not my fault. Really, this time it isn't my fault. Usually it is.
It's my fault because we're having problems with the sound. So people in the chat, how well can you hear me? Because
yeah, please. Yeah. How well can you hear Peter?
How well can you hear me now?
Yes.
Somebody in the chat.
Somebody in the chat. Exactly. Can you hear Peter? Is that good? Yeah. But anyway, we'll let's start. So I guess the big news. It's not exactly our lane. Is the murder of Rob Reiner and his wife, and as the latest news that I have seen is that his son is some sort of not great sound for Peter. Yeah. Well, that's all right. Well, let's say at least if it's still doable and we can continue. Um, it seems like their son is helping police with their inquiries. I mean, it sounds really quite horrific because I mean he apparently had some issues with drugs and homelessness and so on. But if that is the case, that is the person who's responsible, then obviously it's a horrific event. Peter, do you have any thoughts?
Well, when I came across the news, I was shocked. I mean, I didn't like his politics, obviously, particularly in the latter part of his life. But he was very iconic when I was growing up. He was in All of the Family, a very iconic role. I mean, he wasn't a great actor, okay, but you didn't have to be a great actor in that role. But I mean, he did make an impact from everything I could understand. He was a very nice guy. It's very surprising that he would murder as an act of malice. I mean, why would someone want to kill him? I mean, some people would to scream at him or something because he was just the psychotically anti-Trump guy.
Right.
And okay, that's his business. That's fine. It's not a big deal. But
you see, I mean,
his wife.
His wife. But that's the thing that. I mean, if it is the son, I mean, we don't know yet. But if it is the son, then this is a family matter, and you don't know what sort of things happen in families. I mean, the intense hatreds that can develop in families and so on. Great artists have written about that. Strindberg and others wrote horrific dramas about families. So you can have any kind of pent up loathing and so on. I have to say, I never, leave aside his politics, I never thought his films were amounted to much. I thought they were essentially kind of sitcoms turned into feature films. I mean, he worked within the sitcom format, the one-liners, the permanently recurring characters. So I thought he was a talent, but I thought a minor talent. I mean, it's
yeah. Oh, he left a mark. Okay, yeah. He left a mark. Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, it wasn't high cinema, not by any stretch of the imagination, but he did kind of tap into the zeitgeist of the time. Okay?
Yes, so, I think is right, and I think like when Harry Met Sally, which was everyone was talking about it, back when I can't remember, late 80s or early 90s, whenever it was made, and I saw it, and again I didn't think much of it, but everyone liked it, and because it was, as you said, the zeitgeist of the time, which was this dating in New York and all the problems with dating and going out and everything. But it was a very shallow film and done in a very shallow way. Well-to-do, 30-something people who had good jobs, they had no worries about money and no worries about anything. And so, okay,
yeah.
How they're thinking about dating, hey, how do we do it? And then they all have their sidekicks. That's the key. Like as you said, they have a sidekick.
Rob Reiner, he worked in a genre, a meta genre at the time, what people call Star Trek communism. Nobody has any problems with money. You're not worried about your career.
Yeah.
There's no great social conflict.
No.
It's Star Trek communism. Okay,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and another thing that he did, particularly with that film, and you don't see it anymore. You see it very rarely now. Is that you just said it? Everybody was talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we don't have cultural events like that anymore.
Yeah.
We really don't.
Yeah.
It's very rare now,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so he tapped into a vibe that everyone could relate. It was it's a mediocre film. Okay, yeah, it was
Yeah.
mediocre, but it was a point of reference
Yeah.
for tens of millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
For example, what was it? The, What's the pink lady? What was that big thing that was on last year or 2 years? I was going to say Cinderella. No, it's come on, everybody, help me. Um, uh, it was a very anti-male film. It's all about pink. Why Cinderella keeps coming in my head, I don't know.
Oh,
But
I know what you mean. Oh, Barbie, the Barbie doll. Barbie doll.
Barbie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for some reason, but it wasn't about the film itself. Is it really about misogyny and blah blah blah? It wasn't about the film itself.
Right.
But Reiner's stuff, it really was kind of about the film and kind of the banality of life.
Yes.
The first what is it called? First world problems. Okay,
Right.
so you show this film like in
Right.
Albania. What is this about?
But it's
Okay?
also even not first world problems. Is that here they are, they're living in New
A,
York.
a layer of the first.
Right, exactly. They all live very comfortable lives. It's not at all in any way believable. Like, I mean, I think Billy Crystal, I think, played a political consultant. I mean, the idea of Billy Crystal being a political consultant, it's ridiculous. But that's the point. It's like the sitcom world where none of it is believable. Nobody ever does any work. Nobody has any financial problems. It's just, they can afford to banter about nothing. I mean, not nonsense. Just like that's it. And I thought that Reiner did that very well. But I don't. After that, I don't know. I mean, he made a variety of
The
movies.
Spinal Tap thing.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. That was that. Yeah, and then of course films of his that had sort of became quite famous, but that was not because of his filmmaking. I mean, like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, people remember that, but they largely remember it for that one line, like "You can't handle the truth." I mean, it's a memorable line, but that's what made the film. I mean, otherwise it was a very mediocre film. And so you think, okay, I mean, he mastered a certain genre, but it's not. I watched a little bit of CNN that somehow he's a titan of filmmaking.
No.
He's nothing of the sort.
The fact that this was a double murder. So I think your comment earlier, it most likely is a family thing. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
that's that's like a murder, an act of violent passion.
Yes. That's terrible. That's terrible. So, but even like All in the Family, which again it did become a cultural reference point in America. But for someone like me who grew up in England, saw the original. This was an American version of a British show, Till Death Us Do Part, which had more of a political bite. But basically, it was basically they Americanized it. They took the same kind of working class family, but
Like
instead of
rape.
yeah,
Rape
East
was
End of
important.
London. They made him in I think he was in Brooklyn. But it was basically they just copied the British. Well, the British actually sold them the rights, and it was Norman Lear who got it from the British Johnny Spade. All right, so we got that covered. Then another kind of very unpleasant event was the shootings at Bondi Beach, and of course the Israel First crowd and the sort of the kind of the anti-Semitic hunters crowd are of course in on this thing. They grabbed onto it because of course anytime anything events like this happens, then of course it's all anti-Semitism, and so here's a typical headline from the Telegraph, one of those awful newspapers. And here's the Telegraph. It says, the Bondi Beach attack on Australian Jews was grimly inevitable. Of course, it was grimly inevitable. The Jewish community has been warning about anti Semitism rising in Australia. Now the worst has happened. And then he's saying there was an air of inevitability about it. Nobody knows when or where the next anti Semitic outrage will emerge. But with every fake post about Israel killing babies, fake post, with every biased BBC report whipping up the animus of viewers, with every chant of globalize the intifada on university campuses, death comes one step closer.
What?
And then,
Sorry, I didn't see biased. I saw biased reporting on BBC, but it was like the absence of mentioning the fate of the Palestinians. I mean, the BBC is so pro-Zionist; it's sickening.
well, that's the thing. That, of course, any time you report the truth about what Israel is doing, then it becomes, they call it a blood libel. But you notice how they never really deny what the story says. I mean, it's always, oh, this is anti-Semitic, blood libel, smearing. Israel is the most humane society on earth. Israel fights a war with greater humanitarianism than any other country throughout history. So they would just repeat this, and then they say, and then of course they report the blood libel, and of course it serves to intimidate anyone who reports it. Of course, the whole world is anti-Semitic. It's just amazing how the whole world, whatever the organization, it's always driven by anti-Semitism. Um, and so that was the Telegraph. And then, of course, Netanyahu, not one to miss the opportunity, issued his statements. And he has a meeting, special government meeting in Dimona. And he said, on August the 17th, about 4 months ago, I sent Prime Minister Albanese, Australia, a letter in which I gave him warning that the Australian government's policy was promoting and encouraging anti-Semitism in Australia. So that's it. That's always standard fare, which is whenever you do anything that Israel doesn't like, then you have to say this is encouraging anti-Semitism. I wrote, your call for a Palestinian state pours fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. It rewards Hamas terrorists. It emboldens those who menace Australian Jews and encourages the Jew hatred now stalking your streets. Anti-Semitism is a cancer. It spreads when leaders stay silent. It retreats when leaders act. I call upon you to replace weakness with action, appeasement with resolve.
So censorship.
That's right. Of course. Instead, Prime Minister, you replace weakness with weakness and appeasement with more appeasement. Your government did nothing to stop the spread of anti-Semitism in Australia. You did nothing to curb the cancer cells that were growing inside your country. You took no action. You let the disease spread, and the result is a horrific attack on Jews this autumn.
Well, I mean, George, do we know any motives? I don't care what Benjamin Netanyahu says coming out of Australia. I heard about it, but I don't know any more background story.
Well, it's not clear yet because I mean, there were two of them, father and son. Apparently, they were from Pakistan. I'm not sure that's been confirmed that they were from Pakistan. The father came over on a student visa, and I think it's sort of been renewed ever since. He's not on. He himself is not and Australian, but then I'm not sure they're suggesting that the son may be an Australian citizen, but I don't know because Australia doesn't have birthright citizenship, and if the father was not a citizen, now maybe the mother was an Australian citizen. I'm not sure. But so anyway, I think I read somewhere that the son was an Australian citizen. Um, and but I don't know. I don't know the motive. I mean, I'm assuming that it's probably something to do with Israel, yeah, and Gaza. That's what I'm assuming. I mean, I don't know why else would they be launching an attack on a Hanukkah event.
Yeah. I mean, but see, I mean, it's again. I mean, we've been over this territory so many times. I mean, is it was someone radicalized because of the behavior of the Israeli government towards Palestinians. I mean, that seems pretty straightforward to me. I don't know where the anti-Semitism fits in. I
No,
never.
I don't know, and but particularly, I mean, in some of the media reports, they say that in 2019 he came under suspicion and was under surveillance. That the son, that is, the son was under surveillance because of his ISIS association. So that was 2019. Um, and but you know, who knows? They said, but anyway, that investigation ended. So who knows? But it's, you know, it's certainly plausible that they were radicalized by by what was going on. And again, that was not wholly unlike the kind of events that we had in the United States when we had the an assassination of two. Two young people who had worked at the Israeli embassy. So that's you know, that explicitly dealt with Gaza. Um, but you know, I don't know. I mean, it's obviously quite an horrific event. I mean, it seems like 15 people were killed, um, and you know, obviously you got the stories about the gun control, whatever. But it's very peculiar because in Australia you have very strict gun
Very,
control laws. So I don't know what else you can do. You can how you can make it even tighter than it is at the moment. And and then of course there's a lot of talk about this. What somebody a bystander had tackled the one of the gunmen. But that was itself also a very strange event because although he tackled the gunman, apparently he took away his gun. The gunman then went back on the bridge and continued the shooting. So it was a kind of you know he took a risk grabbing the gun from him, but then he left the gun by the tree. It's not like he kind of shot the gunman or held him down or whatever. He just sort of left the gun by the tree, and then the guy went back on the bridge with his to join his father, and then essentially the whole thing came to an end through a shootout with the police. Um, and so obviously we're going to have a. I think they got the Israel lobby is going to play this for everything they've got. I mean, hey, you know, they got no, this is, that's unfortunate because, of course, what happens in such events is that it changes the subject, and so suddenly, hey, we're the victims, we're the eternal victims. Everyone is eternally picking on us. This goes back you know, thousands of years. Everyone's always picking on us.
yes, and meanwhile, people are still dying in Gaza.
Right.
Lives are being destroyed in the West Bank. Yeah, George is absolutely right. It changes the subject. Okay,
That's right. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very very convenient. And the bravado that comes out of Netanyahu. See, this is what happens when you recognize a state of
Yeah.
Palestine. It doesn't have
Right.
anything to do with that at all.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's trying to control the narrative. Okay,
That's right.
and
That's right.
it will for a news cycle. Yes, it will.
That's right. So in the meantime, of course, we've got the meetings in Germany. But
George, were they elected to have meetings with each other? Was that their mandate when they took
it was
office?
their mandate. It was, you know, they see each other more than, you know, like high school girls, you know, like high school girls who are inseparable. You know, they kind of who see each other, you know, they can't live without each other. They see each other one or every 2 or 3 days. So it's like the same thing every 2 or 3 days. Because remember, so we've got in Berlin, um, uh, the Zelensky, and we've got Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and now Starmer and Macron have flown to Berlin.
Oh, a sleepover. And BlackRock will provide the bed.
That's right, exactly. So for a sleepover, but remember, we've also got the big the big event. We can talk about that in a minute. About the big event coming later this week, when we got the EU leaders are going to be meeting in Brussels. This is the big enchilada when they're going to make a decision about the money. To get the
The
money, to
money.
get hands on the money. The um, and so but this and this the more we talk about it, I mean, I think we discussed yesterday, the Europeans, for all that Trump kind of dismisses them as useless and weak and stupid and whatever, they're outsmarting him. They're outmaneuvering him
Yep.
every step of the way. So they say, "Oh, they're so stupid." Well, they know what they're doing, and they're being very clever about it. And step by step, they're undermining everything that he's trying to do.
Exactly. This is what we talked about yesterday. I mean, the national security strategy. We'll put those Europeans in their place. Okay,
Right.
we're gonna, there'll be a franchise of American power in Europe. Yeah, yeah. Keep talking, and
Yep.
at the same time, they're running circles around. Okay,
Exactly. Exactly.
he
Um,
could he could stomp his foot and put an end to all of this
yeah.
freaking
Yeah.
pass. Okay, we won't.
Exactly. Because every time the Steve Witkoff and Kushner meet them, then they effectively ensure that they get a veto. You give them a veto. You're meeting them, and they're putting forward proposals. They know these proposals are going to be rejected.
But this is, I think, this is the purest Morgan paradigm. That's what we should call it. Is that after the meeting they delete everything and then they start again from scratch. They go over everything over and over again.
Right.
Meeting over. Well,
Right.
we made progress. Then they come, they delete, and then they start all over again, which is suits the Europeans just
That's right.
fine. Okay.
That's right. That's right. So here is the Guardian story, and and you can see that the European leaders, including Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, will meet Vladimir Zelensky on Monday in a show of support hosted by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. As the US pushes for a swift end to the war in Ukraine, British Prime Minister, the French President, and the heads of NATO and the EU, who have criticized a previous US proposal to end the Russian invasion as too favorable for Moscow, are set to convene with Zelensky on Monday evening at Merz's offices in central Berlin.
Yeah, but George, okay, we're on the treadmill now. Okay?
It
Now
is on the
I'm beginning to lose my patience. Okay. So where's the European proposal? Did I miss it?
the what?
Where is the European proposal?
No, there's no European proposal. I mean,
I mean,
it's like, well, I mean,
these guys get paid by the hour, I guess, because this
right?
just goes
No,
on and on and on. Where is your proposal? You don't like Trump's? I don't like Trump's proposal. Well, where's your proposal?
but
Well, we
that's
know
the
what the
proposal.
Russian
Yeah,
one is. Well, where's yours? Stop
that's right.
whining.
That's right.
Stop whining. Stop meeting.
But it is whining. The whole thing is whining because exactly, you say, what is the European proposal? It means, well, here's the American proposal. We don't like this. We don't like that. We want to rewrite that. We want to rewrite that. And then here it is. We've rewritten your proposal, which means that the whole thing is no longer any kind of a peace proposal. I mean, this is just nonsense. But hey, we've rewritten it, but you don't have your own proposal. So, oh, well, we're still working with the Trump plan, but you've rewritten this. Yeah. Oh,
Dismantling it.
yeah. So yeah, well, we're gonna have a, what was it, the free economic zone, the free economic zone. That's it. Oh, and we want Article 5 like guarantees. Article 5 like guarantees. Oh, and
No, everybody, either you have Article 5 or you don't have Article 5.
right,
You
right,
can't
yeah.
have like.
That's
It doesn't
that's
work that way.
yeah,
It doesn't work that way. People
yeah,
that Article 5, like, that means you don't understand what Article 5 is.
yeah. That's right. That's it.
And what you're just doing is you're confusing people. Okay?
Exactly.
There's
Exactly.
you can't be a little bit pregnant. Come on.
Anyway, here's then this article from the Guardian continues. And this is where it gets amusing. A German government spokesman said the U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner, who were holding a second round of peace talks with Zelensky in the German capital on Monday, had also been invited to the working dinner. So just in case they were feeling left out, oh, you're going to join us for the working dinner. Witkoff said in a social media post, a lot of progress was made after he and Kushner met Zelensky for 5.5 hours at Merz's chancellery on Sunday without disclosing details.
What do you talk about in 5 hours?
I don't know what you talk about five and a
Are
half
they
hours.
bitching about Trump? Is that what they do? Is that their pastime?
I don't know. But you see, what is so bizarre about all this, and we touched on this yesterday. We talked about it a lot yesterday. That it's like you're talking about peace plans, peace negotiation. There's no peace plan. There's no peace negotiation. You can only negotiate with the parties who are in the conflict. I mean, what is this peace negotiation? Russia is not taking part in any of these talks. You have no basis for thinking that Russia will accept any of this. None. In fact, the Russians have made clear that they're not going to accept this.
Well, I mean, and essentially, not. I would say most broadly, the commentary from the Kremlin is on media reports of what these proposals.
Yeah,
are.
they usually. That's right. But when they talk, like for instance, Ushakov, he gave interviews. He says, I don't think we're going to accept this. Now, Ushakov, I mean, he kind of, he's pretty close to the Kremlin. He knows what's going to be acceptable. This isn't acceptable. But the strange thing is that they're not really interested, and that's interested in finding out what would the Kremlin accept. And so they're arguing among themselves, or debating among themselves about what? I mean, it's like it's completely point. Oh, this is our joint peace plan. Well, it's already goes straight into the waste paper basket. You've now, but that, of course, for the Europeans, that's the goal. That's their goal. And why do they all troop off to Berlin? It's they got other things to do. They troop off to Berlin to make sure nothing happens, nothing whatever is
Well,
to happen.
this is something that George and I discussed. For those that have recently joined, yes, I have a sound problem. I'm painfully aware of it. Okay, but there's either that or we were going to cancel. I'm glad we didn't cancel. But anyway, but this has a dual purpose, George. Is in what we talked about yesterday is keeping up the drumbeat for war. Okay, this is what they want to stress more than anything else. Okay, they have an ulterior motive to do this here. Okay, it's the E3. They're getting it like the big three during the Second World War. They cheat and steal all of the time. Okay, and so their point they don't have a plan. They don't want a resolution. They're waiting for the orange man to flip again, waiting for that. Okay. In the meantime, the drumbeat to war.
Exactly.
We're very serious. We're going to deal with. It could happen in 2 years. It could happen in 3. It could happen tomorrow. Okay.
Exactly. And it's very, very much along those lines. And a key figure in all of this, and he's making this whole thing acceptable in Europe, is of course Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Germany, because after all, in the past, like the past 80 years, the idea of Germany becoming the military dominant power in Europe, the idea of somehow Germany militarizing, would have been thought horrific. We don't want to go through that again. But you've got people like Radek Sikorski. Radek Sikorski goes around saying, "Well, there's one thing that I fear more than German action, and that is German inaction." So people like him, and they're working obviously with British intelligence. They're pushing this whole idea of a militarized Europe, which is and led obviously by Germany. I mean, Germany is the economically strongest power. They do have a long military tradition. I mean, they put all that, on the back burner or in the back of the cupboard. They could bring it back. I mean, it's like
I don't know.
I don't know either. To be honest, but you don't.
I always see Mertz in a business jacket. If he takes his shirt off, what are we going to see? I mean, takes his coat off, what are we going to see? Okay, keeping that uniform nice and ironed up, huh? Okay,
right. But look,
I mean, George is absolutely right because we remember the unification process, okay, in 1989, 1991, that whole process there. And read the European press, read the British press.
Right. Yeah.
Return of German militarism. Now, 30 years later, how can the European Union legitimize
Right.
German
Right.
militarism? This
That's
is the sea change that we've seen.
That's it. It's completely so. Merz is a subject of an obsequious profile in the New York Times. Very long, but we'll only take a very short excerpt from it. So here is the um, here is the turbulent times of Friedrich Merz. The new chancellor believes the world needs a stronger Germany. He's still navigating how to do it. The world needs a stronger Germany. And here it says, when Mr. Trump's negotiators stunned Europe by reaching a Moscow-friendly agreement with Russia to end the war in Ukraine, Mr. Merz was the first continental leader to get Mr. Trump on the phone and push back. Now, all that is complete lie. There was no agreement to end the war in Ukraine. That's just not true. To say that there was some kind of a deal, there was no deal. He's talking about that 28-point plan. That if you look at the link on that, the link relates to the 28-point plan. There was no deal on the basis of that 28-point plan. And it says,
and all the more so, it can't be a deal if one side hasn't even seen it.
Right, exactly. Mr. Merz still believes he can coax Mr. Trump to break decisively from Vladimir Putin.
Right?
And they quote him, I remain hopeful that we will permanently convince the United States and win them over to end this war together with us in Ukraine. That means we must support Ukraine until Russia can no longer continue this war economically. That is the only option we have.
So they want an economic war of attrition.
Yeah. That's the plan. I mean, that's it. So they're having this meeting in Berlin.
Good money on it.
Yeah. And so it goes on. Still, time and again, Mr. Merz has watched Mr. Trump swerve back toward a version of a peace plan that would heavily favor Russia, and has then tried to talk the president out of them. Most recently, he has urged Mr. Trump to approach Russia and Ukraine not as an opportunity for profit, but as a long-running war that must end in a lasting peace. During his election campaign, Mr. Merz publicly questioned the future of American democracy under Mr. Trump's leadership, yet throughout our conversation, Mr. Merz expressed hope that America would return to its post-war tradition of supporting Europe and democracy. And
you want your allowance back. Okay, well, get out of your basement. Okay.
Right. That's right. That's right. But the thing is that this is all. It's a step-by-step process. They can't do it overnight, but it's a step-by-step. We're getting ready for war. So he made that speech, which we talked about yesterday, speech over the weekend, the one that he said, Pax Americana is over. And what that meant, as far as he was, Pax Americana is over. Now is the time for Europe to step forward, a German-led Europe. And a lot of the shibboleths are going to disappear. It's like we accepted. Oh well, Germany of course can't have nuclear weapons. Germany absolutely not. But why? Why? I mean, how long is that going to stay on the books that Germany cannot have nuclear weapons? I mean, why? Who's going to stop Germany from having nuclear weapons? France is going to stop it. The UK is going to stop it. I mean, once you allow this whole genie out of the bottle, once you start the militarism, there's no way you're going to tell the Germans, well, you lost the war. We don't want any of that. That's gone. That issue's now gone. Yeah, absolutely. Germany can have nuclear weapons.
Well, it does bring into question: did Germany lose the war?
Yeah. Very good. That's a very good question.
The interesting thing about that question, it's a very serious one too, is that if it weren't for the Holocaust, what would you say about Germany during the Second World War? See, that's the card that's always played.
Well,
it's the Holocaust. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Other than that,
You would say, if it weren't for the Holocaust, you're absolutely right. You would say Hitler had the right idea. He was fighting
Right.
Russia.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
he
And
was fighting Russia.
everything on the margins, that's always been muffled in hushed voices. I've heard that
That's
all my life.
that's
Okay.
right. That's right. Because the real threat to Europe is and has always been Russia. Russia has always been the real threat. Hitler identified the problem. The unfortunate thing is that he got obsessed with a side issue. You
Yeah,
know,
he
yeah,
just there were some excesses.
excesses,
Just
but they
some
were, but
excesses.
the excesses would be absolutely acceptable were it not for that side issue. That was the one that was a real problem, because that was his own his distinctive obsession, which guaranteed that the Western powers could not support him. If he'd limited himself to, hey, let's carve up Russia because they're a barbaric culture. They're a civilizational challenge. I think he would have got it. He would have got all of the support that he needed. But the Holocaust, the anti-Semitism, the going back to the Middle Ages with the anti-Jewish laws. I mean, that was just that was a little too much. Um,
But now we have to. It's a clear and present danger. Okay,
yes,
you
yes,
and now you're going to go. Oh, you want to talk about something that happened 80 years ago? Oh, really? That's what you want to talk about? We're talking about now. Okay, we're talking about the clear
that's
and
right.
present
That's
danger.
right.
Right?
That's right.
It's happening. It's
Yes.
happening.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. It's happening now, and it's being done by That's how they're working and say this huge existential threat that we face from Russia means that we have no choice but to move towards really building up Europe's defensive capability, and that means we've got to forget everything that we've been talking about with the all this ridiculous thing about World War II. That's ancient history.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, because you know, this is why this conversation is going to resurface because Hitler was creating Europa. He was creating a a global power. See, the colonial powers, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the British, they had their own parts of the world. Well, Hitler and the Nazis said, no, 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 we're going to do it here, okay?
yes,
And we're all going to be part. And it's not. This is it was considered a positive goal, a united Europe. Now, again, the Germans will run it, okay, yeah, but
yes,
this will be a
yes,
united
yep,
European culture,
yes,
okay?
yes,
And,
yes,
and this is what we're hearing again.
yes. That's right. That's right.
I mean,
Um,
and the only way you can do that, the
yes,
only way you can do it
and,
is mounting external enemies. Okay? Russia's the most convenient one, always
that's
is.
right. That's right. And that's really the key is to what extent all of this coming, and this is why the Germans are really in the forefront of all of this, is that essentially they're saying, look, I mean, things just got haywire in the 1930s and 40s, but we're still really on the same page. There was an article in Foreign Policy magazine, obviously very critical of Trump. And the issue that the Foreign Policy magazine raised is, well, Trump seems to be playing this great power politics. He seems to understand the world in terms of great power politics, but not in the way that he understood it during his first term. Remember, 2018, they wrote that national security strategy. It's United States, Russia and China were involved in the kind of struggle of great powers. They say now he wants to make nice with these great powers. His idea of great power politics is that, hey, I'm going to make nice with Russia and China, and I'm going to stamp my foot down on the lesser powers. And they're aghast at this. Foreign Policy magazine is absolutely aghast at this. And I just want to show you this um, article in Foreign Policy magazine, and interestingly, he brings up the Russia issue here. Well, hey, these are not good guys. So the headline is Putin's already won. He's exposed fatal divisions in the West, even as Russians still back his Ukraine invasion. And then he's saying the document appears to delegitimize the entire post war European project. The decades long process by which Europe created a common market and currency out of the devastation of World War II by attacking the EU as just another sovereignty sapping transnational organization in coded language. The new strategy also seems to echo Vance's infamous Munich Security Conference address from last February, and then implicitly endorsing this also. And then it goes on. Here's as George Varoufakis writes in his well-received new book, The West: History of an Idea, the concept of a unified West has been defined by suspicions about Russia, at least since the Congress of Vienna of the early 19th century, which ended the Napoleonic Wars. Tsarist Russia, having just thrown back Napoleon's Grande Armée, was made part of that 1815 peace called the Concert of Europe, but the rest of Europe was always wary. By 1843, France's Marquis de Custine was warning that Moscow planned to conquer the West, and a generation later, the English social philosopher Richard Congreve wrote that number one on Europe's agenda should be the elimination of Russia from the system, because it is an Eastern, not a Western power. So here, this is Foreign Policy magazine clearly endorsing this view, definitely not endorsing the Trumpian view. In the 20th century, Western alienation from Russia continued after the 1917 Russian Revolution, interrupted briefly by the World War II alliance. But during the Cold War, this notion of Western self-definition, in contrast to Russia, led again to a strong unity for the Western nations. The happy days of strong unity. And of course, Washington took the lead when the world divided neatly into East and West blocks. And then there was even a spell of new Western unity in the early stages of the Ukraine war, when Biden rallied NATO against Moscow, despite his often erratic approach to arming the Ukrainian. But despite Putin's horrific depredations and flagrant violation of territorial norms, Trump appears to have no compunction now about making the West look fractured, hollow, and indecisive in the face of Russian support for the war.
Well,
Yeah.
so there should be a world war to take care of this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can be as descriptive as you want. I think that those are such broad brushes. Okay, I mean, the French, the British, and the Russians were on the same side during the First World War. Okay,
They were on the
And,
first side.
Britain and the Soviet Union were on the same side during the Second World War. So your broad brushes. And
No,
because you're published there, I'm not impressed. Okay.
this guy's a regular columnist at Foreign Policy, so he's not just anybody who's published it. He's a columnist at the Michael Hirsch. Now, what you said is very interesting, because not only were they on the same side in the two world wars, they saved the West. World War I, they saved it. The Russian offensive in the East in 1914, which led to absolute devastation of the Battle of Tannenberg, but it was enough to save Paris from Germany. Germany was already fighting on two fronts. But because they had to move some of their forces to the east to take care of Russia, they didn't have enough forces to take Paris in September 1914. So that they saved France, and then basically they saved the West. They saved the West in World War II. I mean, that's a better known story, but they did it. But you see, if you go back and you say, well, really, the idea of the West is about defining ourselves in opposition to Russia. Why are we defining ourselves in opposition to Russia? Well, they're barbarians. They are Eastern. They're Eastern Asiatic people. Well, now you're going back to a long shop-worn tradition of certain
Yeah.
kind of European thinking, which is that the Russians are barbarians. They're Eastern. They're Mongols. They have a
Yeah, but they still have Tchaikovsky and they have
yeah,
Chekhov and
Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. Yeah,
it's so inexplicable, isn't it? Okay, it's just rubbish. Okay,
of course it is. Of course
I
it
mean,
is.
the thing is that um, this is just old-fashioned projection. Is we Europeans are virtuous, the Russians are barbarians. Oh,
Yes.
but what did Belgium do in Africa? Okay, what
Right.
did the British do in India? Oh, we're the virtuous people. We're not the barbarians. See, what they do is all of the negative traits that you know about yourself, you project it on to
Right.
Russians. That I'm not that.
That's right.
We're law-abiding, God-fearing people.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
it, 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 it's so amateurish. Okay, and
When
these
you yeah, you're right. Amateurish. I mean, intellectually, of course, it's not. It's not worth thinking about. It's not discussing, but it's significant. It's a very politically and culturally significant. This is Foreign Policy magazine, who basically is saying, well, the West defines itself. Apparently, there's no mention there for the whole German episodes and World War One and World War Two. That just it completely
those
omitted.
lost those lost 12 years.
Well, exactly, and then so we're now back. And apparently the only time there was any good, well, we have the sort of the Grand Alliance and so on. Barely mentioned, and then of course I guess the Gorbachev era. When the Soviet Union and Russia just simply prostrated themselves. Gorbachev Yeltsin era, they prostrated themselves and said, "This is fantastic." They just do everything that we tell them to do. Um, but this is the kind of intellectual fodder for the whole militarization of Europe. Russia is a threat, and Russia has always been a threat. They say, "Well, hey, look, you know, Tsar Alexander marched into Paris. Oh, we didn't like that. He went to Paris. We don't want that. Imagine that Putin's going to be in Paris. Um, you know, uh, so,
Yeah,
so
but see,
we're going back to that. But going back to that. Oh, Tsar Alexander marched into Paris.
yeah, but see, all of this is a self-fulfilling prophecy because if you have a security architecture that is designed against and without and designed against Russia, this is what you're going to get because Russia will say, well, we don't accept this. Okay, there were times where they were powerless to push back, but when the time could, when they could start doing that, and this is what we're seeing right now. And so this genius that wrote this article here, um, what would he say about the concept of indivisibility of security? I mean, is that
He
even in
wouldn't.
his
He wouldn't. He
vocabulary?
would no. He
Is it intellectual imagination? Right. Countries don't have to like each other. They don't. Okay. But we should all agree that they shouldn't fight each other. Okay. So when we come up with some rules that everybody can like play, have be a stakeholder in and try to avoid what happened in the 20th century twice, because this guy, no, the simple solution is destroy Russia. Okay, but that's your simple solution. How do you avoid destroying yourself in the process?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's right. Well, that's the thing. They never really think that through. They just think, well, we just got to get tough. Peace through strength. We're going to get tough. We're going to get, apply more pressure on Russia, more aid for Ukraine, and then say we got to arm, we got to militarize. We got to, the Zeitenwende. The whole move towards, rearmament. Germany has to change its foreign policy. That's kind of the thing. Now they don't think about the consequences. They just think, well, at some point, Russia will cave once they realize that they're completely hopeless. There's no historical basis for it.
Well,
But
there is an historical
that's what
example
the
of it,
policy is predicated on. Oh, well, Russia at some point will cave.
but that was Hitler's
That was
Russia.
Hitler. Yeah, no question. That was Hitler's idea. Now, It's very funny. We talked about the U.S. national security strategy, and and then, but no one really paid attention to the UK national security strategy, which came out quite recently. And the tone is very different. And so, if you look at the UK national security strategy, our closest ally, America's closest ally in the world, just Magna Carta, we come from the same tradition. So,
Relationship.
um, and
Talk about it, really.
here is the UK national security strategy, and then it's here. This is it, 2025, and you can just see it's all preoccupied with Russia. Very unlike the American security strategy, which basically said we need peace and stability on the European continent. Russian aggression menaces our continent. Um, the Strategic Defense Review has identified the most acute threat as that posed by Russia and prescribed a NATO first, but on a NATO only plan for the modernization of our military.
Yeah, but
Global.
I mean, George, is this document assumed that Britain is a formidable global military power?
Well,
I mean,
well,
it's just two islands off the at the very end of West Asia now.
no.
That's all really it is. Okay, the city of London it performs an important financial function for a lot of the Western world. I'll give them that. I'll give them that. But when's the last time they had an aircraft carrier they could actually sail?
Well, the British foreign policy is predicated upon their ability to control and manipulate the United States. That's what they think. They know perfectly well. They
What
cannot
page is
take
that?
on Russia.
What page is that on? What page is that?
Page. That's not that is that's
Okay,
it,
that's right. That's exactly right. It's
right.
not, they never say it because that's what they truly believe.
That's what they truly believe, and that's their meal ticket. That's their calling card. That's how they've been able to punch above their weight in world affairs. Since 1945, they punched above their weight, given all their economic problems. Yet they've remained a major power in the world because of the America connection. But I think this is where it gets very interesting because this is a very different tune with the British singing from what the Americans are. So you've got the UK national security strategy, and then you've got the US national security strategy. Very, very different. So it becomes hard. How do you have any kind of an alliance when they see the world in completely different terms? And of course, the woman who had worked on this document was your friend Fiona Hill. Fiona Hill, who had worked for Trump, then well, she was going to have a fainting fit during the meeting in Helsinki, and then she pops up here working on the UK national security strategy. And then you can see clearly what is Fiona's Hill role. How does Fiona Hill get to be direct Russian and Eastern European policy in the Trump administration? She's obviously, she's a British citizen. She obviously is working for the British government, and yet she was right there at the heart of Trump's first term. Yeah.
Yep.
Uh,
But she's a surrogate for neocons, the unipart, whatever you want to call it. I mean,
that's right.
it, it's proven to be a lucrative gig.
It's an extremely lucrative gig. And now since we're having such an enjoyable time talking about the British, one person that we haven't talked much about is the new head of MI6. Um, rather striking looking woman, one has to
And a
say,
very colorful family history.
and a very colorful family history. And we can talk a little bit about that. But she, as the new head of MI6, has just is about to deliver a speech. I think she's delivering it today. warning the British people. This is unheard of. It's never happened before. When you have people who are head of MI6, they would be in the shadows. They wouldn't be making public statements. You're just there. You're doing a job. I mean, you're supposed to be gathering intelligence. You're not supposed to be making public statements. But instead, she's making public statements. So here is the report in the Guardian, and here the front line is everywhere. New MI6 head to warn of growing Russian threat. Blaise Metrovelli expected to say UK faces a new age of uncertainty. His speech identifying Kremlin as key threat. And assassination plots, sabotage, cyber attacks, manipulation of information by Russia and other hostile states mean that the front line is everywhere.
So maybe you're better informed than I am. So MI6 is not involved in assassination plots, sabotage, cyber.
No, it never does it.
But they don't do that. They don't.
No, they don't, because they don't.
Projection.
Yeah, they feel that, it's a morality thing. The British are well known to be kind of very moral people. They ethics. They feel very strongly about that. So no, they never conduct any assassinations, or anything really bad. I mean, they don't really go around interfering in other countries' internal affairs or arrange coups or anything like that. It's just they wouldn't do something like that. That's not who we are. As they would like to say. But anyway, she goes on, and it's still quite extraordinary that she goes around making these public statements. And so she says that this is her first speech on the job, and she says the UK faces a new age of uncertainty where the rules of conflict are being rewritten, particularly in light of wider Kremlin aggression after the invasion of Ukraine. And she goes on, the export of chaos is a feature, not a bug, in the Russian approach to international engagement.
Isn't that British foreign policy?
But, the chaos, you've brought the chaos. I mean, I don't...
Yeah. You NATOized Ukraine. Russia didn't do that.
That's right, you NATOize them. And she said the agency will argue, and until Putin is forced to change his calculus, it is expected to continue. Similar comments about the scale of the threat, particularly from Russia, are expected to be made by Air Chief Marshal Richard Knighton, Chief of the Defense Staff, who is due to say in a separate speech that the situation is more dangerous than I have known during my career, and call for the country as a whole to be stepping up. And now, and then here we are. Metrovelli is.
How does Russia threaten the national security of the UK?
Well, that's the thing. They don't, of course. It's the Russian ships go by in international waters, and the UK starts messing around with them. Russian ships are doing nothing wrong. The UK starts messing around, trying to buzz their ships. Trying to suggest that they're going to, apprehend the ships. This is the UK. Then Russian ships are not in UK waters. They're in international waters. It's the UK who seems to be angling for some kind of a confrontation with Russia.
No, they happily go into the Black Sea and call the Baltic Sea a NATO lake.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Here this goes on. And Putin should be in no doubt. Our support is enduring. The pressure we apply on Ukraine's behalf will be sustained. So again, this is a matter of policy. Why is the head of MI6, an unelected person, talking about what is a matter of policy? Pressure we apply on Ukraine's behalf will be sustained. And then it's nice cheap.
And so, how does that affect UK national security?
It doesn't. So this is what.
Let me just give a counterintuitive thing. So if Britain stopped aiding Ukraine, it would be at the detriment of UK's defense and security. Is that what the argument
Well, it doesn't really. The idea is.
I don't understand.
No, I don't either. I mean, no one has ever made the case as to in what way would defeat for Ukraine affect anyone at all in terms of security in Europe, because the except that they have to bring up this ridiculous Hitler argument. It's always Hitler, Hitler, Hitler. Rhineland, Austria, Sudetenland. It's the same.
Danzig. Yeah.
It's the same argument, but they don't. But that's a stupid, stupid, ignorant argument. They don't have anything else, and so that's why. So why? So but even if you're afraid, even if you're afraid of Ukraine defeated, why are you picking a fight? Why are you buzzing Russian ships? Why are you doing this? Why are you essentially when Russian ships are in international waters? Why are you making threats as to Kaliningrad? So those are all about attempts to provoke. Now, if you're trying to provoke, how does that help your security? But anyway, just since you brought up that really interesting point about her interesting family background, and it's worth noting just for one reason. I mean, obviously, what your granddad did, doesn't mean doesn't affect what you're going to do. His grandfather of incoming MI6 chief was leading Nazi spy. This is the standard. The grandfather of the incoming head of MI6 was a Nazi spy chief. Reports have said Blaise Metrovelli was announced as the new chief of MI6 earlier this month, becoming the 18th person to take over the role. So, the Daily Mail reported her grandfather, Konstantin Dobrovolsky, had previously defected from the Red Army to become a Nazi informant in the Chernihiv region of Ukraine. And then the newspaper said German archives showed Mr. Dobrovolsky was known as the Butcher, or Agent Number 30 by Wehrmacht commanders. Reports also said the Nazi spy chief had a 50,000 ruble bounty placed on him by Soviet leaders and was dubbed the, quote, worst enemy of the Ukrainian people. Ms. Metrovelli's grandfather also sent letters to superiors saying he personally took part in the extermination of the Jews, the newspapers said. And then we have a Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office spokesperson said Blaise Metrovelli neither knew nor met her paternal grandfather. Blaise's ancestry is characterized by conflict and division, and, as is the case for many with East European heritage, only partially understood. It is precisely this
Only partially understood. Well,
yeah,
I
I
would
don't know.
say,
Yeah,
I
but
would say, usually avoided
well, it's very
ignored.
interesting. Blaise's ancestry is characterized by conflict and division, and, as is the case for many with Eastern European heritage, only partially understood. So it's one of these, we can understand it. They just had very strong views about Russia. We understand it. It's just, they made a few mistakes along the way. It is precisely this complex heritage which has contributed to her commitment to prevent conflict and protect the British public from modern threats from today's hostile states as the next chief of MI6. Now, this is very, very interesting. They appoint her with her family background as the new head of MI6. Now, they know perfectly well what that meant. They know perfectly well how Russia would react, and given her obviously intense, passionate feelings against Russia, people can say, well, yeah, I mean, look at your grandfather. This is done deliberately. This isn't an accident. Oh, whoa, we didn't realize. Of course they knew. They knew perfectly well. You don't get to be an MI6 and they go through your family history. They knew all about her family history. Somebody leaked this material to the Daily Mail. So they were actually openly boasting about her family background. So they knew this, and they said, yeah, 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 okay, put it out there, and she's still going to get the job, and the Russians are going to just have to lump it.
Well, here's another example, Christina Freeland.
Freeland, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, again, this is, we said this about 40 minutes ago. Hey, there were some excesses. Okay, 80 years ago. Come on,
Yeah,
you guys. See, this is the great whitewash. This is the
yeah,
great revision that we're all seeing with our own eyes in real time.
yeah.
Okay?
That's right.
Oh,
That's
okay. She never met her paternal grandfather. Okay. But she seems to have his worldview.
right. That's exactly it. That has her grandfather's worldview. But what is so striking is that the British, they appoint her. They knew this exactly. They knew all about. They did it deliberately. It's done deliberately to as essentially a provocation to Russia. They knew exactly how Russia would react to this, and they not only appointed her, they openly boasted of making this appointment. And they say, well, it's a very
No, it's not.
complex. Oh, really? Would you say the same thing about Israel? Would you say the same thing about all Israel and the Jews and Europe? Look, it was a very complex situation. There was the Germans. They had their Madagascar plan, and they were working with the Zionists. Trying to work something out. Trying to move people out of Europe and tried to set up a state in Palestine. I mean, look, it was very complex. Who knows what's the exact truth of all that? Have they ever done that? You could easily make the same case. You could easily make the same case. It was a very complex situation, and given world events, everything got messed up. But
Well,
no one tries to make that argument. But they're making this argument in this case precisely in order to antagonize Russia.
wait, obviously, MI6, George has already pointed out, the heads of MI6 very rarely are heard from. They're by definition, they work in the shadows, right? But it seems that there's been an enormous effort in the media to speak for her about her family
Right.
past.
That's
It's interesting. Does she have anything to say about it?
well.
Well, I mean, since it's been brought up, since it's been brought up.
I don't know. But she probably say, look, I never knew my grandfather. That's probably true. No one, on that argument is that whether she is responsible for what her grandfather did. No, she's not. Obviously,
Yeah,
I mean, she has nothing to do with it. But that isn't really the issue here. The issue here is you went ahead and appointed her into that position, and she is absolutely spouting the same views as her grandfather did. That is the issue, and the British are openly endorsing it. Well, it was a very complex time. Look, when that guy in Canada, I always forget his name, when he made that speech, and Chrystia Freeland, you remember Chrystia Freeland? She was standing there applauding. You remember? Boom, boom, boom. She knew exactly who this guy was. Whatever, Justin Trudeau, maybe he's an idiot. He didn't know who he was.
yeah.
She knew who he was. And she was excitedly applauding, and then because, yeah, we were on the same side.
But, and then you have Kaya Kallas saying, "Oh, the Soviet Union, Russia won the Second World War. That's new." See,
That's news. That's news.
these
That's
are
news.
all these are data points.
Yeah.
Okay, you could just say, "Oh, that was unfortunate. It was an underling. Didn't know who the guy was." We heard all of this nonsense. Okay, and Trudeau, he went. He didn't even address the issue. Then he went straight into it's Russia's fault. Like, okay,
That's right. That's right. Exactly. It was Russia's fault because Russia was making propaganda out of all of this. But the interesting thing is, this was arranged. This was a carefully arranged event. So that's why it wasn't like, oh, well, we didn't know what was going on. So this was a very very carefully arranged event. It just so happened that I think that professor in Ottawa, was a name I always have difficulty pronouncing, but he kind of pointed this out. What's his background? They were basically assuming, well, we're just going to get away with this.
yeah, and that's what they want. That's it, George. They want to get away with it. It's like a frog in a boiling pot. Okay, you never feel a dramatic change. Just
Yep.
very very slow. And they're percolating
Yep.
Western audiences, Western publics to say um, they'll never say it directly. It's like you know if it weren't for the Holocaust,
Yep.
Hitler
That's
would
exactly
have
what
got
they're
it.
saying. That is exactly what they're saying. That's the whole point, which is that, yeah, I mean that we're really on the same side. We're all basically all on the same side. It's just that things things got a little things went a little out of hand.
Got a
Uh,
little out of hand.
yeah, but basically, this was a good guy. This guy, he's
It
into
was like it's like a frat party. Got a little out of hand.
that's right. Just like this guy, who was known as the butcher, uh, affectionately known as the butcher. He's okay. Maybe got a little bit excited, doing his job. That
Anyway, it was complicated.
Yeah, it was a very complicated. But the important thing to keep in mind is always is these are not inadvertent. These are not accidental. These are done deliberately. The MI6 knew all about her. They've known about her all from the beginning, her background, and they pushed for her very young. She's a very young person. You just look at the photograph. She's very, very young. And they pushed for her to be head of MI6. Anyway, let's take a look at our locals page, the Gagglers who want to make sure that the dogs, survive through the winter. I mean, it's going to be a brutal winter, and so they contribute to the tip jar. Really appreciate that. Stone River, always good to see you, Stone River. Thank you so much for your generosity. So Stone River says, "What do you think Russian and Chinese political leaders make of the U.S. national security strategy? What do you think, Peter? What do the
Well,
Russian and Chinese think?"
well, first of all, it I would think that they would. First of all, they were probably a bit surprised, but it's wrapping up a hegemony in a different way. It basically George and I've talked at great length about this. Is that foreign policy is not about diplomacy and negotiation. It's about giving up the goods. Okay, dividing up through transactions and all of that. I think they probably thought it was a uniquely American a document. Um, but then maybe they thought, well, the Americans are going to be obsessed with their own hemisphere, which it means they're off the hook to some degree. But then someone would look at it more closely and say, the Chinese have invested massively in the Western Hemisphere, and Trump wants us out.
Yeah.
Okay, and so people are saying, oh, it kind of lowered the temperature on Taiwan. Okay, and it's outsourcing to Japan and South Korea. You have this more equilibrium. You 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 could you could look at it that way, but I think that if you were on the receiving end, say no, the Americans are not leaving South Korea. Okay? There's nothing in the document about that. Okay, but particularly with the Chinese, you're going to have to scat. You have to leave the hemisphere. Okay,
Right. Yeah, okay. But I don't. Yeah. Okay. But I don't quite see that way because I think that they do. Look. I mean, you also have to acknowledge whether you're China or you go to Russia. Look, the United States is a great power. It is the greatest power, the number one power in the world. Um, if they just insist, this is our backyard. We don't want interference in the backyard. Okay, that's fine. Now, you say that they're not leaving South Korea. That may be down the road. Trump has talked about in the past about leaving South Korea. He's talked about bringing the conflict in the Korean Peninsula to an end. He hasn't done much in the second term, but he did do something in the first term. I would have thought Russia and China, in principle, could live with this. They would have what do they have difficulties with? I think China would have
yeah,
real difficulties
yeah,
with
I agree with you, George, on the
Taiwan,
security.
for instance. Remember when there was a whole thing? You remember this new Japanese prime minister suddenly started getting worked up about Taiwan? Trump did support her. Trump did not support her. Trump kind of left her on her own to face Xi Jinping's anger. He provided no support for her at all. So in this way, Trump at least is being consistent here. We don't want to start messing around in the Taiwan Strait.
I think when it comes to national security, I think the Russians and the Chinese will probably do a little bit of this. Okay, but I think if you and so much of it was focused on the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of tension about that because the the Chinese have been very skillful, very skillful. They have bags of money, and they have got a lot of increased um, better relations with so many countries that are tired of American conditionality from the IMF, from the World Bank. Chinese kind of, we'll build a port. We're not get involved in your politics here.
Right.
That's up to you. Okay. The Americans want the whole ball of
I want the whole
wax.
plot, but I don't see that that's necessarily. Yes, they've invested, but if the Americans really move towards kind of remove, start pushing Chinese out, the Chinese, I think, probably say, all right, well, look, this is their backyard. It always has been their backyard. We really don't want to get into a fight with the United States in the Western Hemisphere. It's just not that's not a good fight to have. As long as they don't mess with us in our sphere of interest, in our sphere of influence, then they can live with it. I think with Russia. I mean, Russia. Okay, I mean, it's your backyard. You do what you want, as long as you don't mess with us. But you can't
Our
say, hey,
backyard.
well, don't mess with us, but we will mess with you. I mean, that's not a reasonable position to take.
Well, we'll see. I mean, again, these documents are very curious, very odd, and more of a wish list than anything else. But
It's a wish list, and that I think is the part of when you said given Stone River's question, like what do they think of it? I mean, one definite thought they're going to have is, well, that's Trump's idea. How is he going to implement it? It's a very ambitious plan, but so far, you've got his own deep state, his national security state, media, the political class, Washington. They're all opposed to it. They're not just going to give up the American global ambitions. So I think they're going to look and say, well, okay, that's very interesting, but how will Trump implement it, and what happens after Trump?
and well, to answer the same question in a different way, um, for the Russians and the Chinese, okay, Trump wants spheres of influence. We can live with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I think so.
but that's
I
the most.
think,
That's very. There's, as usual, the devil is in the detail in all of these
well,
things. But I definitely think Moscow and Beijing were taken aback. Definitely.
I think so. I think that what they don't like is when Washington is overwhelmed by these globalists, and particularly when they start talking about democracy versus autocracy. That's the Biden kind of language. That's they can't live with that. That's sort of Michael McFaul's, and they are thinking, well, okay, 3 years time, there's going to be somebody else there. So, what are we talking about? You're talking about this major shift in foreign policy. Well, how do we? Why would we think that this is going to continue after you're gone? Um, anyway, it's a very interesting question. And then we have Cynthia, a good friend Cynthia. Always good to see you. Thank you, Cynthia. It says. Um, Here is it says the following post, which I wrote down below this post, pertains to a recent article in Zero Hedge titled "U.S. to ask visitors for 5 years of social media history under new plan." And yeah, that's right. And then Cynthia says, considering that censoring foreign visitors based on their social media history, a practice akin to a social credit score, is arguably a very short step from censoring U.S. citizens' social media history. How does the Trump administration justify this stance while simultaneously criticizing EU's fine against X as a merely thinly veiled attempt to violate free speech principles? How can they not see this as anything other than a flagrant double standard regarding censorship? Well, how would they justify it? They say, well, we're talking about people who are coming into the country. So if there's something that in their social media history that we don't particularly like, look, they always had that before. America was always very strict, incidentally, about people coming into the country. If you had ever been, even though you were 17 years old, you were a member of the Communist Party, you couldn't come into the country. I mean, that was during the Cold War. You had to write down all of your political affiliations before you could get, just to apply for a tourist visa. So there's nothing fundamentally new about that. So I think that's a little different from controlling your social media history at home. If they, I mean, that's going to be a difficult one, I think, because that does apply with the First Amendment. But the First Amendment doesn't really apply to, say, well, anyone who comes to the United States will say, well, what's your social media history in your home? There's no right to come into the United States for anyone.
Well, who will want to go to the United States if they feel that that's going to happen? I don't. I really don't understand. I mean, do you have to? if you're, let's say you're going from Paris to New York, I mean, are there going to be American officials in Paris looking at your social media, or is it in New York and they look at your social media and they say we don't like it, so you have to go back home? I mean, I don't
I,
see.
I, I, I,
Well, you know, the FIFA is coming up. Okay, so all of the athletes are going to have to go through all of that. And what happens if you don't like two of the three members of a team? Then the team can't perform. I mean,
well,
it's just not very practical, and I think it's very intimidating for a lot of people. Okay, so what if they don't like my social media? Are they going to arrest me? I mean,
well, no. I think it's the question is whether they're going to allow you into the
into
country.
the country. Well,
Yeah, no,
maybe
no,
if you find somebody they don't like, they could arrest you. I don't know.
well, I don't know if they can. I don't know. I mean, at most, if they don't like it, they can just simply kick you out of the. If you actually got there, but they don't. You're not going to be issued with a visa. I mean, if there's a question about your social
Well,
media,
I mean, that's what I mean. You have to show your social media to get the visa.
I'm
So
not.
just
I'm not sure because look. I mean, if you're going in under your own name, I presume if you have a social media history under your own name, then that's something that's easy to check. It's a lot of work for somebody to start checking every single person who applies
yeah,
for a visa.
yeah.
You to go
I
through
guess
your
that's why they need these
social media history.
AI power generators. You know,
Right? Yeah. Those are the
5G. They
that,
won't
that,
let me back into the country where I was born on this one.
right. Well,
Just drop it off.
but I mean, look, as I say, look, there's no, there is obviously there's no right for a non-American to come into the United States. So they basically have they can absolutely discriminate, however they want. I mean, the courts have upheld. Remember, this is something Trump had already done during his first term, and the courts, basically the Supreme Court upheld and said, yeah, I mean, the United States president can determine who can't come into the United States. That's something different from whether you can start imprisoning American citizens for their social media posts. And that's going to be a much more difficult issue, particularly here in the United States, where you have to really establish some cause and effect issue on violence. I mean, maybe you could do it, but that's a high hurdle in the United States. Not in Europe, but in the United States, it is a high
Don't
hurdle.
they have all this information anyway? I mean, you know, all the major platforms. I'm sure it's watched very carefully. Okay, so like the guy that attempted to assassinate Trump. I mean, Tucker did a really good video on it. I mean, this guy had a huge social media
Right.
background. Okay, and
Right.
the authorities knew about it. So
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how practical this all is. I mean, we're going to keep them out, you know, they have to be pro-American. I mean, it feels really good, but I don't think it's down to practical things.
Well,
You know,
no.
I think they already know a lot of these things in advance.
Well, I would have thought that's something that would be known. In that if you're posting under your own name, which is on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, it's under your own name. Well, you can absolutely check on your social media. But if of course you posted under um, a pseudonym, then presumably you can lie about it. But if they find out, of course, if they do find out, hey, you've been posting under, whatever, what was it, Carlos Longo? What was it? What was the one that Mitt Romney used to post? Mitt Romney and that guy, the creepy guy, Carlos Longo or whatever it was. They find that out, then presumably, yeah, they can just kick you out of the country. I mean, just simply because you lied about your media posts when you
Yeah,
entered.
but on the periphery of this question, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but tourism to the United States is in a free fall. Okay,
Yeah.
it's a lot of places like New Orleans, for example. They're in dire straits because it's so dependent on tourism, and so many other places in the United States, and it's plummeted. I mean, we have to take the COVID hoax aside because obviously people weren't traveling, but I mean now they're going back many years. See these kind of numbers. So I mean, it's intimidating people. It looks like it's an extra hassle. And I repeat, what if they find something they don't like? What are they going to do to you?
Well, as I, say, I think the only thing they can do to you is they can certainly kick you out of the country. I mean, it's incumbent upon them to find if all you've done is on the social media post under your own name, then presumably with AI they can find anything. Whatever, I mean, however you can do it, you can find something untoward. If of course you have been posting under pseudonyms, and I guess a lot of people do. I've never done that, but a lot of
I've
people
never done
post under pseudonyms. Then okay, you will have lied on your entry. If you lie entering the United States, then you're eligible for deportation. I mean, that's just automatic. So I think you can be deported. I don't think you can be imprisoned for mean social media, but you can
it. We'll
absolutely
find out.
be
We'll
deported.
find out. We'll find out.
Yes. And Cynthia appropriately ends and says the only thing that separates Merz from becoming an accomplished leader of Germany is a small moustache under his nose. Um, it's a very interesting observation, which is that I mean, and this goes back. I mean, we're going back again to what we were talking about earlier, which is what could there have been a German leadership that would have been acceptable to the Western powers? You know, shorn of the unpalatable aspects of the National Socialist Party of Germany. And this was the A.J.P. Taylor's famous book. I mean, one of the really outstanding works of history in the 20th century. He's saying, well, it's not really that special. Hitler was pursuing a foreign policy that all German leaders pursued. I mean, he said they all wanted to rewrite Versailles. You know, the animus that he had towards the Soviet Union, communist Russia, is pretty much shared by Germany's political classes. And so there's nothing, his foreign policy really wasn't anything special. It was, you know, anybody in his place would have pursued the same foreign policy. It was the unfortunate aspect was that this National Socialist Party really could not it would be very difficult for the British and the Americans and others to support this. Though they made some effort, they did try to overlook the more unpalatable aspects of Nazism, but they were hoping that he would get rid of it. I mean, it's sort of
Yeah, I mean,
embarrassing.
1936 Olympics is a good example of that.
1936 Olympics, exactly. That's right, and that's why when Hitler in 1934 launched his the Rome Purge, when he purged all the SA people, including just murdering his own former friends and colleagues. You know, internationally, the response was really quite positive. You know, well, Hitler's obviously getting rid of some of the wilder, most extreme elements, and now he's going to become a more responsible member of our of our club. I mean, it didn't really happen that way, but generally it was a positive response to what was just outright murder. I mean, there was no legal proceedings or anything. They just simply
Well,
murdered
everybody,
people.
all through the 1930s, Western leaders. I mean, Roosevelt didn't go to Europe during that time, but everybody in Europe paid homage to the Nazis. Okay, I mean, there's plenty of photographic evidence, and it was considered anodyne in those days. Okay, I mean, it's only in retrospect. Okay, that's you're right. I mean, it was just a bit too excessive. Okay,
Yeah,
it was just, you know, why can't they act like a normal political elite? Okay, so. But you know, as we've said many times already on this podcast here, they're peeling away all of the ugliness of it all.
yeah,
Okay, then the Nazi is a caricature. It's
right,
a boogeyman. Okay,
right,
it's not found. There's no foundation to it.
yeah,
It's not associated with the place. They keep they're making it so inelastic. Okay,
right,
and they've made a lot of inroads. I mean, when people are not very well educated about history, and I think that's intentional, in my opinion.
right,
Okay, and so
right.
you can manipulate these things here. I mean, I can remember when I was teaching undergrads at 20th century Europe, and you know, I remember my students said, "Yeah, the Nazis, they had cool uniforms, man." That's
Yeah,
what he knew about the Nazis. It was
right,
cool
right.
uniforms.
Yeah, no, of course. So that's very true, and I think this is why it is so interesting what Merz is doing, how Merz is rehabilitating Germany, German militarism, uh, German aggressiveness, German Russophobia. He goes to Israel. He goes to Israel. He was there just a few days ago. Does the whole Yarmulke, the Wailing Wall, weeping about the terror, the horrible things that were done by Germany. In the meantime, he defines Germany as in opposition to Russia, and he's essentially done it. He's saying, okay, well, if we can get that out of the way, we can just put that, you know, away from that, so that no one can ever accuse us of being against the Jews or ever doing anything, thinking anything mean about the Jews. Then we can continue with this policy. This is this policy, which is of Russia is the enemy. We have to mobilize the continent against Russia. And then he goes back to this article and saying, yeah, Europe has to define itself in opposition to Russia.
I see in the comments there, RT is very generous and they buy me clothes. And there's one brand that I will not wear that has been proposed to me, and it is Hugo Boss. I will not. No, but George is, we're rapidly running out of time, but George said something that's very, very interesting. Rehabilitating German power in Europe, Germany's economic posture in Europe, remilitarization. They're going to go all. They don't want to rehabilitate the Nazis. No, you can't go that far. You can't say it. Okay,
Yeah.
but they're going to do everything else to kind of box it in and say this is an exception.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And what you can do, absolutely right. That's right. And what you can do, you can actually disown what Willy Brandt did. Because what Willy Brandt did, he wanted reconciliation with the East. We're not interested in that. If you're going to say, yeah, we're very, 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 very sorry about the Holocaust, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we're very, 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 very sorry. No, we love Israel. Israel is on our side. But the rest, that we have to live with Russia and, we have to live with these people. No, we don't accept that at all. So that's the part, that, they disown the Willy Brandt and the Ostpolitik. That was a big mistake. And the Christian Democrats, Schmerz's party, was actually very opposed to the Willy Brandt policy. They didn't think that you should start making peace with the Russians. Anyway, we run out of time. A lot of interesting things.
I apologize, everyone, for my sound. I'll try to get it fixed. I'm not very technically proficient, so I didn't have time to figure it out. But it will be fixed by next week.
Exactly. It wasn't too bad in the end. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody who joined us. Really appreciate it. Thanks you for all your comments and interesting questions. We will be back next Monday. So it's the Christmas week. We'll be back at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And please join me for my live stream tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, think about the dogs and the tip jar. That's a big, big issue. So, all the best. Goodbye. All right. Well, I think does it look like we're ended or not? I think we're not ended. All right. Let me see if we can end it. Nope. All right. That's it. All right. So I'll see you. I'm just going to reboot and then I think they're going to.